I never thought I'd be the kind of guy posting something like this, but here I am. I guess some things just need to be said out loud. I'm 32, married, and I've always thought I had a pretty normal life. A decent job in IT, a house in the suburbs, a marriage I thought was solid. My wife, Jessica, and I had been together for 8 years before we had our son, Lucas. From the moment I held him in my arms, I felt like everything in my life finally made sense. He had my nose, my eyes, my crooked little grin. I'd lie awake sometimes, just staring at him while he slept, thinking about how lucky I was. For 2 years, that illusion never wavered. Sure, Jessica and I had arguments like any couple, stress, bills, family stuff, but nothing that made me doubt that we were on the same team. Lucas was the center of our little world. Every first step, every laugh, every late-night crying session, it was all ours. I was proud, protective, completely invested. I was a dad. Then came his second birthday. Nothing special, just a quiet family lunch and cake, and afterwards, Jessica reminded me that we needed to go pick up his birth certificate. School enrollment was coming up soon, and apparently the state needed the official copy. I didn't think much of it. I'd seen the paperwork before when we registered him at the hospital. I expected to see my name. That's all I thought about, Dad. When we got to the office, they handed me the document. I opened it casually, half distracted, and then my eyes locked on the part that said Father. My chest froze. My name wasn't there. Not even close. Another man's name stared back at me in bold, official ink. I must have blinked a few times, thinking my brain was playing tricks on me. Jessica watched me, her expression unreadable, and I swallowed hard. Jessica, what? My voice cracked. I wanted it to be a mistake, a typo, some ridiculous clerical error. Anything but what I was staring at. Her face didn't falter. No hesitation, no stammer. Just her eyes, wide and steady, meeting mine. It's not a mistake, she said. He's the real dad. You were just the practice. I felt like someone had slammed into me from the inside out. My legs almost gave way. I was still holding the birth certificate, shaking, gripping it like it was some lifeline that could explain this nightmare. I remember feeling the edges of the paper cut into my palms, but not even noticing. My mind refused to form the words. You mean all this time? Lucas, he's not mine. I barely whispered it. It sounded stupid even as I said it, like asking a question I didn't want the answer to. Jessica nodded, as if confirming some simple, undeniable fact. You raised him, yes, but he's not yours. He's Jason's. Jason. That name hit me like a punch. Jason, the guy she had worked with years ago, the one I'd barely even noticed she mentioned once or twice in passing. I'd trusted her completely, believed her every word, watched my son grow thinking he carried a piece of me. And all the while, she'd let me live in that illusion. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the certificate across the hallway and never look back. I wanted to ask why she would do this, why she thought she could make this practice acceptable. But I couldn't. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at her, feeling like my entire life had been rewritten in an instant. And then, in the same quiet hallway where I had walked through the door as a husband and father, I realized something devastating. I had loved and raised a child who wasn't mine. I had celebrated his milestones, wiped his tears, cheered for his first steps, all of it under a lie so deep I could barely breathe. I don't even know how long I stood there before finally collapsing into the couch, holding Lucas in my arms, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down. He was asleep, unaware of the storm in the room, and I thought maybe that was the cruelest part. He didn't deserve this. Not one bit. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even tried. I just sat on the edge of the bed, Lucas asleep in his crib, Jessica on the other side of the room, pretending everything was normal, or maybe pretending I would just accept it. I wanted to throw up, scream, break something, anything, but I was paralyzed. My mind was a mess of questions with no answers. How long had this been going on? How could she look at me, every day, and let me raise someone else's child like a proud dad? How could she say I was practice, as if that was some kind of joke I was supposed to laugh at? Morning came, and with it, the unbearable weight of pretending I was okay. Jessica made coffee like nothing had happened, like the revelation of the night before wasn't slowly crushing my chest. She sat across from me, calm, collected, like she was rehearsing some script. I didn't know whether to hit her, cry, or just leave and never look back. I eventually just asked the only thing I could manage without my voice breaking completely. Why? She looked at me and shrugged, like it was the simplest question in the world. I made a mistake. I didn't know what I wanted back then, and Jason was there. He's Lucas' biological father. You. You were the safe choice, the one I knew would love him unconditionally. I didn't want to hurt him. I laughed, bitter and hollow, because the irony of her words was sickening. She didn't want to hurt him, but she didn't think twice about hurting me, the man who had literally been living as a dad for 2 years. Safe choice? You raised him to think he had two parents who loved him. How is that safe? You lied to me every single day. She didn't argue. She just sat there, calm, almost smug, as if my anger was irrational. My chest tightened, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to shake her, to scream so loud that the walls would crumble, but I just sank into the chair, feeling completely defeated. After that, the house became a war zone of silent tension. I couldn't look at her the same way. Every smile, every hug, every time Lucas called out Dad, it was like a knife twisting in me. I wanted to love him, because he didn't deserve the fallout of her betrayal, but every interaction came with this mental barrier. He wasn't mine. My DNA didn't make him who he was. And yet, I had loved him fully, completely, for 2 years. Friends and family noticed the shift. Jessica tried to act normal, like nothing had happened, but I couldn't. I started staying later at work, making excuses to avoid being home. Even weekends felt suffocating. Watching her play with Lucas while I sat on the couch pretending to read a book, my mind constantly replaying the words she had said, the words that had shattered my life. I eventually confronted her again. I needed clarity. I needed honesty. I couldn't process everything with this fog in my head. Did you do anything else like this? I asked quietly, like the answer could shatter me even more. Her response was maddening in its simplicity. No, just this. Just this. Like raising another man's child for 2 years was a minor inconvenience. Like the lie that had defined the last 24 months of my life was nothing more than a blip. Then came the part one wasn't prepared for, the fear of the future. How could I look at Lucas and not see the child I had thought was mine? How could I even think about raising him now, knowing that the man in the world who had the right to be his father wasn't me? Jason's name on that certificate haunted me. It felt like a ghost hovering over every moment, reminding me that everything I had done for him wasn't mine to claim. I started doing stupid things, tracking her phone, going through emails, trying to figure out if she had been seeing Jason while we were together, how long it had been brewing. The paranoia consumed me. I knew it was toxic. I knew it was unhealthy, but I couldn't stop. Every message, every history log, felt like a punch in the gut. Eventually, I realized I had two options. I could walk away completely, leave Jessica and Lucas behind, and try to salvage what was left of my dignity. Or I could stay, fight through the betrayal, and somehow learn to be a dad to a child who wasn't mine biologically. Neither choice felt like a victory. Both felt like punishment. I spent days staring at Lucas, watching him sleep, wondering if he'd ever understand. He had no idea. He didn't know that the person he called Dad had just discovered that he wasn't biologically his. I wanted to cry so badly, but I also wanted to punch a hole through the wall. I was exhausted, broken, and completely unmoored from the life I thought I had built. And yet, I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't abandon him. Not when he had no say, not when he had done nothing wrong. But every time I looked at him, I felt the sting of the lie. Every hug, every smile, every tiny hand in mine was a reminder that I had been tricked, manipulated, and yet, somehow, still deeply, irrevocably, in love with him. I don't know how I'm going to survive the next few months. I don't know if I can forgive Jessica, or even forgive myself for not seeing the signs. But for now, I'm trapped in this impossible limbo, raising a child who isn't mine, while navigating a marriage built on deception so deep it feels like it's swallowed my entire world. I couldn't sleep again that night, or the night after, or the night after that. My mind was a constant loop of disbelief, rage, and heartbreak. I kept replaying Jessica's words over and over. You were just the practice. It didn't even sound human when I said it in my head. Who says something like that? How do you casually tell someone they weren't even a real father to their own child? By the third day, I knew I couldn't just stew in my anger. I needed answers. I needed closure, or at least some kind of confrontation that wasn't just simmering in silence. I demanded we sit down, alone, and she agreed with that calm, almost eerie composure she had shown since the first revelation. I remember sitting across from her at the kitchen table, Lucas playing quietly in his room, and feeling like I was staring at a stranger. The woman I had shared everything with, trusted completely, looked back at me like someone I barely knew. Why? I asked again, voice low and shaking, the way I always did when I couldn't hold it together. Why not tell me? Why let me think he was mine? I, I raised him. I loved him. And you just let me live in a lie. Jessica's eyes softened a little, but not enough to ease the sting. I, I didn't know how. I was scared. Jason, he made things complicated. I thought if I told you, you'd leave. And Lucas, he's still your son, in every way that matters. I laughed, though it came out hollow and bitter. In every way that matters? So biology doesn't matter? 2 years of midnight feedings, 2 years of learning his cries, 2 years of birthdays and holidays. None of that matters because my DNA isn't on a piece of paper. She didn't respond immediately. She just sat there, hands clasped, looking tired. But I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the shame, maybe even a little defiance. She thought she could justify this. She thought she could make it right. But she couldn't. Not for me. Not for what I had invested into Lucas. Not for the illusions she'd let me live in. I left that conversation feeling hollow. But leaving the house wasn't an option, not yet. Lucas didn't deserve to be abandoned by the only father figure he had ever known. I couldn't do that, even though every fiber of me wanted to run, scream, and disappear. So I stayed. I endured. But staying meant living in constant tension. I started noticing the smallest things. Jessica's casual looks at her phone, a text she thought I wouldn't see, moments where she smiled at Lucas in ways that felt off, like she was rehearsing affection she didn't fully feel. I became hyper-aware of every interaction, every gesture, every shared moment. My paranoia was exhausting. I was losing myself trying to process her betrayal and still act normal for Lucas. I also started thinking about Jason, the man who was legally Lucas' father, whose name was officially on the birth certificate, whose existence had been a secret from me. I wanted to find him, to see him, to confront him. I needed to know if he even knew, if he had any idea that for 2 years, I had been raising his son. I didn't know what I'd do if I saw him, whether I'd scream, beg, or just break down completely. Eventually, I called a lawyer. I needed to understand my options. Could I even fight for custody? Was there a way to legally protect my role in Lucas' life? Could I make Jessica pay for what she had done? The questions were endless, but the answers were cold and impersonal, like statistics on a spreadsheet. Legally, Jason had rights. And because she had chosen to lie, I was essentially an unrecognized parent in the eyes of the law. Sitting in the lawyer's office, I felt the full weight of it. 2 years of being a dad, and it didn't mean a damn thing legally. I could fight, but I knew it would get messy. And I knew that Lucas, who didn't deserve this, would be caught in the middle. My mind went back to the nights I stayed up holding him, listening to his breathing, feeling his tiny chest rise and fall against mine. How could I explain to him someday that I wasn't really his father, even though I had loved him like I was? I started documenting everything, the texts, the emails, her confessions, the timeline of events. I needed proof. I needed leverage. I needed some semblance of control in a life that had been completely hijacked. And deep down, I knew I wasn't doing it for myself. I was doing it for Lucas. If I had to fight tooth and nail to stay in his life, I would. He was mine in every way that counted, even if the law said otherwise. Evenings were the hardest. I'd watch her play with him, laughing at his little jokes, and I'd feel a mix of rage and heartbreak so intense it made my chest ache. I wanted to grab him, take him to my room, tell him he was my world, my son, even if it wasn't on paper. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to bide my time, plan, and prepare for what was coming. And then one night, after Lucas had fallen asleep, I finally let myself break. I crumpled to the floor, papers scattered, phone clutched in my hand, sobbing like a man who had just discovered that the foundation of his life had been a lie. Jessica watched silently from the doorway, and I could tell she felt something. Shame, guilt, maybe even fear. But it didn't matter. She had done this. She had chosen this path. And I was going to navigate the fallout, one excruciating, sleepless day at a time. The realization that my life had been built on lies didn't hit all at once. It was a slow, creeping poison, eating away at me, turning every smile, every laugh, every bedtime story into a reminder that I had been deceived. And the worst part? I still loved Lucas. Deeply, irrevocably. And that love, that attachment, was both my anchor and my curse. The days turned into a haze of quiet anger and forced normalcy. I went to work, smiled at coworkers, and came home to the same house, same wife, same child, but everything felt fractured, like I was living in a dream that had turned sour. Every laugh Lucas made felt tainted, every dad stabbing me in ways I didn't think were possible. I decided it was time to find Jason. I needed to see the man whose name was on that certificate, whose DNA supposedly made him Lucas' real father. I didn't know if he even wanted a relationship with his son. I didn't know if he'd care at all. But I needed to know. Not just for me, but for Lucas. I spent hours online, piecing together the scraps of information I had, tracing social media, LinkedIn profiles, anything. It felt invasive, desperate, and petty, but it was the only way I could feel some semblance of control. Eventually, I found him. Jason, 34, living a few hours away, engaged to someone else, a man whose life seemed perfectly ordinary. I didn't know what to do next. Call him? Show up at his door? Part of me wanted to scream at him, part wanted to beg him to take responsibility, part wanted to disappear entirely and leave Lucas behind. I sent him a message, terse, to the point. You have a son. His name is Lucas. He's 2 years old. You need to know this. No response for 2 days. I almost gave up, almost let it go. But then the reply came, short and clinical. I had no idea. I need details. Where is he? I gave him the address, though part of me hated that I was handing him my life on a silver platter. Within 48 hours, he was on my doorstep. Tall, broad-shouldered, calm, almost too calm, like he didn't realize the emotional hurricane he was walking into. Jessica opened the door, startled, and I could see panic in her eyes. This was her mess, but I'd invited the storm. Jason stepped in, and I could feel the tension coil in the room like a live wire. I watched them talk for a minute. Words exchanged too quickly for me to catch. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. Not with anger, not with accusation, just recognition. Recognition that I had been raising his child, caring for him, living as his father. Lucas, he said quietly, he looks like you. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. I wanted to tell him that DNA didn't matter, that I had been there every day, that I loved him like he was mine. But all I could do was stand there, feeling every betrayal crystallize into sharp edges. Over the next few days, we tried to talk. Jessica retreated into silence, like she was waiting for us to resolve it so she could reclaim some shred of normalcy. Jason was careful, measured, and I hated him for it. Hated that he had this calm control I didn't feel. I was raw, exposed, furious, heartbroken, and helpless. And yet, I knew I couldn't let Lucas see that. Not entirely. He didn't deserve this chaos. We discussed custody. Jason wanted to be involved, naturally, but he also didn't want to uproot Lucas from the life he had known for 2 years. I wanted to protect him, keep him close, and maybe selfishly, assert that I was his father in every sense that mattered. The negotiations were quiet, tense, filled with silences that screamed louder than words. Through it all, Jessica stayed on the sidelines, occasionally whispering apologies, but mostly defensive, like she was still trying to justify the unjustifiable. And I realized something. I didn't just feel betrayed by her. I felt betrayed by life itself. My role as a father, my identity, everything I had built, shattered. And yet, in the middle of this, Lucas was blissfully unaware. He was still the same little boy who reached for me when he was scared, who giggled when I made stupid faces, who trusted me implicitly. That trust became my lifeline. I couldn't destroy it. I couldn't let my anger seep into his world. So I learned to compartmentalize, rage during the day, patience at night, and love whenever he needed me. I also started seeing a therapist. I didn't want to admit it, but I needed someone to guide me through the emotional wreckage. I needed to unpack the layers of anger, betrayal, grief, and confusion without hurting Lucas. The sessions were brutal. I cried more there than I had in months. I screamed into a pillow. I banged my fists against walls. I felt raw, naked, and utterly defeated, but slowly, painfully, I began to find some clarity. The clarity was simple. Lucas was my son. Not by DNA, not by certificate, but by time, care, love, and presence. Every night, I rocked him to sleep. Every morning, I watched him stumble through the living room in tiny pajamas. Every laugh and tear, it all belonged to me. And if the law didn't recognize it, fine. I would. I couldn't abandon him, no matter how much I hurt, no matter how much betrayal festered in my chest. I also realized that the road ahead wasn't just about Lucas. It was about me reclaiming myself, setting boundaries, and dealing with Jessica and Jason in a way that preserved my dignity. I had to protect my mental health, my emotional stability, and, above all, my relationship with the boy who had unknowingly turned my world upside down. I didn't know how this would end. I didn't know if Jessica would leave, if Jason would step in fully, if I could survive this without completely breaking. But one thing was clear. I was still Lucas' father in every way that mattered. And I wasn't letting that go, no matter how complicated, messy, or painful it got. It all came to a head about a month after Jason entered our lives. The tension had been simmering for weeks, the kind of tension that makes you feel like you're walking on glass while carrying a backpack full of bricks. Lucas didn't notice it at first. He just laughed and played, oblivious to the storm swirling around him. But I could see it in the way Jessica and Jason sometimes exchanged glances, loaded, silent conversations that excluded me entirely. And I couldn't take it anymore. One night, after Lucas was asleep, I called Jessica into the living room. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I wasn't sure if I even wanted answers at this point. But I knew I needed closure, or at least some kind of understanding. I need the truth, I said, my voice low but steady. All of it. How long? How long were you lying to me? How long were you planning this? Jessica looked at me, and I could see the cracks in her calm facade. She finally broke. It wasn't planned, she admitted, voice trembling. I met Jason after we started trying for a baby. I wasn't sure about us anymore. I panicked. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to ruin what we had. I thought it would be easier if I just let it happen. I never wanted to hurt you this way. Her confession wasn't relief. It was another blow. Easier for her, maybe. But what about me? 2 years of fatherhood built on lies isn't something you just shrug off. I could feel my chest tighten, my throat closing, but I forced myself to stay composed. I wasn't going to break down, not in front of her. Not now. You let me raise him, I said carefully. You let me love him. Every milestone, every late night, every birthday, I thought that was real. You didn't just betray me. You made me complicit in a lie that I thought was the foundation of my life. Jessica started to cry, finally human, finally real. And maybe that should have softened me. Maybe it should have made me forgive. But it didn't. Not yet. Not entirely. I had to process the betrayal, the rage, the heartbreak before anything else. Over the next few days, we had long, tense conversations about custody, responsibility, and the future. Jason was careful, respectful, and calm, everything I wasn't. And that drove me insane. But through it all, Lucas remained untouched by the chaos, and I realized something vital. He was still mine in every sense that mattered. I started setting boundaries with Jessica. I made it clear that her actions had consequences. She couldn't gaslight me, make excuses, or manipulate my feelings anymore. She had lost the absolute trust one once gave her, and she had to earn it back, or live with the consequences. And yes, some part of me wanted her to suffer for what she did, but the larger part wanted to protect Lucas and myself from spiraling into hatred that would destroy us both. Jason and I eventually met again, this time with clearer intentions. He didn't want to take Lucas away, but he wanted to be involved. I let him. And oddly enough, letting him gave me a sense of control I didn't expect. I could still be the father Lucas had always known. I could still claim that role emotionally, physically, and morally. DNA didn't define that. The first time Lucas called Jason dad was surreal. I felt a pang of jealousy, yes, but I also realized something profound. My relationship with him didn't diminish. Lucas had 2 fathers now, in a sense, and I was still his first, his constant, the one who had wiped his tears, celebrated his first steps, and loved him without condition. That love didn't vanish because of a name on a piece of paper. I began rebuilding myself. Therapy helped. Talking, writing, processing. I realized I had been defined by Jessica's betrayal for too long. I had to reclaim my identity, my dignity, and my role as a father without letting anger consume me. It was hard, daily work, but it was necessary. Jessica and I separated eventually, Not immediately, but the distance became inevitable. Living under the same roof with so much betrayal was impossible. She stayed involved in Lucas' life, but the romantic connection was gone. I can't say I feel nothing toward her, I don't. But I feel boundaries, clarity, and the understanding that my love for Lucas outweighs any attachment to the woman who deceived me. Lucas continues to thrive, blissfully unaware of the storm that once raged around him. I watch him play, laugh, learn, and I feel a fierce protectiveness. I don't think I'll ever stop feeling anger toward Jessica for what she did, but I also know that my role as his father is untouchable, regardless of bloodlines or legal documents. I am the man who was there from day one, who held him, loved him, and raised him. That is who I am. That is my son. And for now, that is enough. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Jessica and Jason will figure out their roles, or if legal complications will arise. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her, or if the anger will fade completely. But I do know this: Lucas is my son, and I will continue to be his father in every way that matters, for as long as I live. I can't erase the past, and I can't undo the betrayal, but I can shape the future. And in that, there's a kind of peace, hard-earned, messy, and bittersweet, but real. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the story, consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It helps me share more stories like this. Thanks.